The dimly lit warehouse was tense with a heavy silence. Maruf stood frozen, his gaze fixed on the 12-year-old Asian girl locked inside the cage. His breath caught in his throat, and his pulse pounded in his ears. His mind raced, heart thundering in his chest. Ray leaned casually against a rusted metal crate, arms crossed, a dark smile playing on his lips as he watched Maruf.
Softly to himself, "I won't do this."
Ray let out a low, dark chuckle, clearly enjoying the inner turmoil of his captive. He straightened and stepped forward, his presence as cold and calculating as ever.
You think you have a choice?
Ray gestured behind Maruf with a sharp motion of his head. Maruf felt a chill crawl up his spine, and before he could react, the sound of a door opening echoed through the room. Heavy footsteps drew closer. Maruf turned slowly. His eyes widened as two of Ray's men dragged Ken into the room, bound and gagged. His friend's face was battered, swollen, and bloodied. His eyes pleaded for help, for any way out of this nightmare.
Whispers, "Oh my God."
Maruf's breath hitched in his chest. His stomach dropped. His friend was in danger, and there was nothing he could do. His mind raced. He was caught in a nightmare of impossible choices. Ray stepped forward, a cold smirk on his face. He casually placed a gleaming knife on the table in front of him. The sharp metal caught the light, glinting ominously. "We don't waste talent. You're either in, or you're out. You make the choice, Maruf." A long silence hung in the air. Maruf looked from Ken to the knife, his heart pounding harder with each passing second. The weight of the decision was suffocating. Every breath felt like a struggle. But in that moment, everything changed. Bang! The sound of gunfire and splintering wood cut through the tension like a knife. The warehouse doors were slammed open with a deafening crash. Armed officers poured into the room, weapons drawn. Chaos erupted. Ray's men scrambled, trying to flee, their hurried footsteps echoing across the vast space. But Ray, unfazed by the sudden arrival of law enforcement, merely sighed, his smirk never faltering. His cold eyes met Maruf's. "This isn't over." As Maruf was dragged outside by officers, the sounds of the raid echoing behind him, he cast a quick glance up at the rooftops in the distance. There, high above, a shadowy figure stood, watching the scene unfold. The figure was still, almost like a silhouette, blending into the night. The figure lifted a camera with deliberate precision, aiming it directly at the 12-year-old Asian girl. Click. The sound of the camera's shutter filled the air, a sharp, final note in the chaos. The figure disappeared into the shadows as quickly as they appeared. Maruf's heart pounded in his chest as he was roughly ushered into the back of a police vehicle. He felt the weight of the figure's gaze still lingering on him, even though the figure was gone. The flashing lights from the squad cars reflected in the rearview mirror, casting an eerie glow across Maruf's face.
You know Ken, right?
Ray asked, his eyes boring into Maruf. Maruf swallowed hard. How did Ray know about Ken? Ken was his only friend at school, a goofy kid with a love for dinosaurs.
He's caused me some trouble, stolen something from me, something valuable.
Maruf's blood ran cold. He couldn't imagine Ken stealing anything, let alone something that would anger Ray.
You tell me where to find him, or you'll regret it.
Maruf's mind raced. He couldn't betray Ken, but could he face Ray's wrath? Fear tightened its grip on Maruf. He felt trapped, like a fly caught in a spider's web. He had to make a choice, and fast. Suddenly a muffled thump. It came from deeper inside the warehouse. Maruf's head snapped towards the sound.
Was that Ken?
He held his breath, listening intently. Another thump, then a whimper. It was definitely Ken. Maruf's fear morphed into a surge of protectiveness. Ken was in trouble, and Maruf couldn't just leave him. Maruf looked from Ray to the shadowy depths of the warehouse. His decision was made. He couldn't betray his friend. He had to help Ken, even if it meant facing Ray's anger head-on.
Well?
Ray growled, impatient. Maruf took a deep breath, steeling himself. Before he could answer, a piercing sound cut through the air. Sirens. Sirens! The warehouse doors burst open with a deafening crash. Blinding lights flooded the darkness.
Police, everyone freeze!
Heavily armed officers swarmed in, shouting commands. The shadows scattered, men scrambling for an escape. Chaos erupted. Ray stumbled back, momentarily stunned. and shot Maruf a furious look, his eyes blazing with fury. Then he was gone, swallowed by the pandemonium.
Relief washed over him. He was safe. But what about Ken? Maruf had to find him.
Maruf ducked behind a stack of crates, his heart pounding like a drum solo. Maruf crept through the warehouse, his heart in his throat. The air was thick with dust and the smell of fear. He called out for Ken, his voice a shaky whisper. He rounded a corner and froze. There, slumped against a wall, was Ken. He was tied up, a strip of cloth gagging him. Relief flooded Maruf.
Ken, are you okay?
He quickly untied the gag.
Maruf, run!
Ken coughed, his eyes wide with fear. Before Maruf could react, he felt a cold shiver crawl down his spine. He looked up. High above on a catwalk, a shadowy figure stood, a camera clicking. A click that echoed like a gunshot in the silent warehouse. Then, the figure vanished.
Ray might be gone, but this wasn't over. Not by a long shot.
Maruf felt a chill deeper than the cold of the warehouse.